The 2025 Edelman Trust Barometer shows that the most influential voice has long been someone just like me. And I can't tell you how many times I've used that in my internal and external conversations with clients and colleagues. But now that just like me thing, that circle it's shrinking. We're moving from what you call echo chambers to what I love how you describe as turtle shells. What does that actually mean? And how is this different now from where we've been before?
So what I think we are seeing is a tightening of who we trust over the past 3 or 4 years. It started out with some really strong polarization 3 years ago. It started then, or it continued last year, with people feeling this deep sense of grievance. Somebody wasn't helping them, and it was the people around them. And now we've moved to what one could call insularity, this turtle shell. And what we see with that in the Trust Barometer is that while previously people were really strongly convinced that others were wrong, now they will only listen to people who are exactly like them. So we've moved from a kind of we in society, it's only me, that's the only thing that matters. And that is really dangerous for society, of course, if there is zero consensus here, if we don't even listen to the same facts, the same information. We live in parallel worlds. And that is a communication problem for companies, not just about, what they say and how they talk about their product, but how they're being perceived. And any misstep or any misunderstanding will then result in serious problems. But it also means something significant for a company, how you operate. To use the phrase employee engagement, we now are in a situation where a significant number of people will say, if I get a new line manager and he doesn't think the same as me, he hasn't got the same values as me, I don't want to work in that team. And when you think about companies who were very happy to talk about their purpose, speak about the values that they have, and suddenly that's gone, that's not relevant anymore, it's actually a problem for how I operate, how I appear. What does that mean? How can I still work as a company and be trusted? And what does it mean for society? And let's bear in mind, this is not just about business. Amongst all the institutions that the Trust Barometer tracks, NGOs, media, government, and business is seen as being the most ethical, the most competent. And even there we see trust faltering. And most importantly, we see it polarized, caught up in grievance, and getting ever more insular.
Thank you, Tim. I wanted to just pull on a thread about polarization. And you mentioned about echo chambers, which obviously they reinforce the polarization that we're seeing in society. Do you see the polarization across all different strands? So a mass class divide. Do you see people feeling that the system is just rigged against us, and there's the sort of haves and the have-nots, the establishment, and those who have been left behind by the system that isn't really working for everybody? Do you think it's also an economic issue, or cultural, psychological? Is there a technological divide as well? I mean, what's your take on the polarization?
Yeah. So the data show us, and they show that to us since about, I think, 10 years or so, that there is a clear divide, a trust divide between people who have low income and people who are well off. Why? It's very simple. People who are well off, the system works for them. They're happy people, relatively happy. They trust because, of course, I'm making money. Yeah, I'm rich. But here's the fundamental thing. The trust is general, this gap between those who are well off and those who are not is widening. And it is widening dramatically in industrialized societies like the United Kingdom, Germany, the United States, Canada, and so on. So that is the first thing. The second thing is it's a cultural thing. If you only believe people who are like me, if you're unwilling to trust people who have different values, a different background, a different culture, a different lifestyle, then you have something on top of that. And then throw in technology. We've seen that already some time ago, that people are increasingly worried about the impact of technology on their lives. Yes, the technology sector has for a very, very long time been the most trusted of all industries. Why? Because we use things like this phone here. Awesome, it works for me. But as soon as it comes to technologies that people are not quite certain about, it used to be genetically modified food, self-driving cars, AI. People are getting really concerned. And actually, right now, we are at this point where people just fear that AI is going to take away their job. And low-income people fear that especially much, low and middle-income people. You know what the most depressing statistic in the whole of the Trust Barometer is for me? That people are losing hope. There is hardly any country now that we track, and we track 28 countries around the world, large and small. There's hardly any country where people believe that the next generation will be better off than they themselves are. So if you think things only get worse after certainly, we've done the Trust Barometer now for 26 years, but we've gone through decades of, things will get better. People will get richer. My children will be better educated. And that is now flipping, and is, of course, flipping especially for younger people. Then we have a huge problem at our hand. And then the question is, what can we as a society do about it? And what can businesses do about it? Because if business is seen as the most competent and the most ethical institution, and if 61% globally still believe that I can trust one person, that's my CEO, and alongside my neighbor who has similar trust values, then there is a responsibility and obligation on business to act and become part of that solution. Although, just to add one more statistic, if you have an insular mindset, if you don't trust others, then only 43% of these people will trust the CEO of their company. So there are limits to what a CEO, a company, a business can achieve. But achieve they have to try, because otherwise, society will just fall apart.
Okay, so from that, I want to ask you a question about fear, Tim. And the question, it's about how. It's not about why we fear. Like our brain notices threat first, and I get why. Fear gets attention by default. The amygdala lights up, the ancient part of the brain. I think that's just how the brain works, and you and I aren't going to fix that. So my question is, what are the structural forces in media, politics, the tech ecosystem that play on human nature to amplify the bad news? I know why bad news and fear move faster and why they stick. I get that. But how can we help to blunt the effects of fear to enable that trust brokerage that the Edelman Trust Barometer report suggests outside of our turtle shells?
So I've been a journalist for more than 20 years. And there was this old flippant phrase, if it bleeds, it leads. Yeah, so if there's something horrible happening, this will be the main story. The one thing I learned during my years being in communications is that fear stops people from taking in information. Think about climate change. If you tell people how awful everything is going to be, they're just going to shut down, they shut off, they're not going to listen. if you give people hope, if you show them what is doable, what is achievable, you can break through this. And this is where this concept of trust brokerage comes in. If a company goes out there and tries to browbeat people and tell them this is how it is and this is how we can make the world a better place, people will not listen if they have a different point of views. But if you bring people together to work together, if you facilitate this coming together and try to help people with different points of views to develop a solution, to work together towards a solution, then you can create trust. Now, will everybody happily join such an experiment? No. But companies that just tell their people this is how it is will not succeed. But companies that provide maybe a platform, provide a solution, a path towards a solution that brings people together, that may overcome fear. But there is no silver bullet solution, I think. This is not if you just do this, it'll work. No, because it's really hard work. If you've ever been, I don't know, at a Thanksgiving dinner, or you've met that uncle, or just a young colleague who is of a very different persuasion, and you think, how can they even think that? How can they believe that? Do they not know that? Yeah, if that is your instant reaction, and I confess it's very often mine, then you have lost already, because you will never be able to establish trust. So I think we all have a lot of learning to do as individuals and as companies. How can we make that trust happen? How can we broker that trust? What can I as a company, I as a brand do to work that? And there are some examples that are well known and award winning like, for example, the work we did with Heineken, where we bring two people together from very different backgrounds.
That was that ad series from a few years ago, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, I remember this ad. So what happened there?
Well, basically, on a few subjects, we brought people together. You just could see there from such a different background. And over a drink, they were just talking about themselves. And people were completely flipped in their understanding of what that other person was. It's a kind of person you would probably cross the road for if you see them, whether you're a heavily tattooed skinhead or a heavily tattooed, very alternative lifestyle person,
right.
Whatever it is. But so there is, of course, the question: how does
is the solution then? That beer is the silver bullet.
I wouldn't say that. I don't drink. But no, what it is the connection. Yeah, that platform to talk. But how do you do that in a world of 8 billion people? How do you scale it? And I think there, the place of work is an important one, or the platforms that companies can provide. What is it that a company does, say, an activation around public events or in public spaces? What is it that companies can do with their airtime, with their content platforms, to provide that understanding, to see that meeting of minds? We are at Edelman, we always say, you can't just tell people, trust me. Action earns trust. So what is that action platform that a company can create to make that change, to make people understand that by working together we can save the society, we can re-establish society. Over the past 26 years, and when I was a journalist and now at Edelman, I've been every year following the Trust Barometer. And every year I've been society more depressed about the state of the world. And now we're at this point where I say, God, this is really getting dire. And this is why brands really have to do something. But this is an important opportunity for them, because if they don't act, this will be a very challenging market and society and world for them.
Yeah.
And that's especially true for international brands.
Yeah.
Because one of the numbers that we also see is that people don't trust foreign companies anymore. Yeah. This is, depending on the country, 60 to 90% of people only trust companies from their own country. What does that mean for a multinational? How do you earn trust? Again, trust brokerage. Earning trust is ever more important for a company for the permission to operate.
Yeah. Tim, one question from my side. People always say the truth speaks for itself. But that's not always really the case. And, you know, the great persuaders aren't necessarily the truth tellers. And what I wanted to ask you is, in this world where you've got the persuaders and the trust brokers, you know, what's the difference?
Persuaders try to get people to think like themselves.
Yeah.
But that's not a given anymore. You can't expect that people think for like you do. You can just gather your tribe around you. Nice, but it's limited. And in a world that is so heavily polarized and that is fragmenting in lots of echo chambers or turtle shells, that won't get you very far. That's why bringing people together is so much more important. That's why trust brokerage is the way forward, I would say.
Great.
Farzana, because it's the difference between marketing, which persuades, and public relations, which builds trust. Like that's the core of it.
Yes, absolutely. And if you look at can I trust Gartner? I don't know, but if you've looked at the latest Gartner forecast, they expect that in today's world, public relations will gain dramatically importance, partly also because of how people get their information increasingly from generative engines, AI, and that is another really, really important thing to bear in mind here. How will AI change people's minds? Because AI tries to please you, which means it reinforces the echo chamber and the turtle shell, because it tries to play into exactly what you want and what you're usually interested in.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you very much. I hope this was useful.